The summer sun was merciless in the little town of Oak Ridge. Heat shimmered on the cracked pavement, and the smell of freshly cut hay drifted in from the fields that stretched beyond the town square. Amelia Reed wiped the sweat from her brow as she balanced a grocery bag against her hip. At 17, she had already learned that life wasn't kind to girls without much money. Her shoes were worn thin, her dress was patched twice over, and yet she carried herself with a quiet dignity that made people notice her, even if they didn't say anything. She had just come out of Mason's general store when she noticed an old man on the other side of the street. He was hunched over, his steps shaky, and a cane trembled in his grip. Horses and wagons rolled past, along with the occasional pickup truck, and Amelia's chest tightened. He looked one wrong move away from being knocked down. Without hesitation, she hurried across. "Sir," she called gently, "do you need a hand?" The man turned, his wrinkled face hard to read. His gray beard covered most of his expression, but his cloudy blue eyes seemed sharp beneath tired lids. "I'd appreciate it," he said, voice gravelly but strong. Amelia slipped her arm under his, steadying him as they walked. The traffic slowed for them. A driver tipped his hat at her for helping. Amelia gave a polite smile, though inside she was thinking about her mother at home, coughing through another bad day, and her younger brother who needed supper on the table before dark. Still, she didn't rush the old man. Step by step, she matched his pace until they reached the sidewalk. "There we go," she said softly, letting him go once he was steady. The man studied her for a moment longer than felt normal. "You didn't have to stop." She shrugged. "It looked like you needed someone." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Not many young folks notice anymore. Amelia gave a polite nod, adjusted her groceries, and started to leave, but his voice stopped her. "What's your name, girl?" "Amelia Reed," she said cautiously. His gaze flickered. For the briefest second, he looked like he recognized it. But then he only said, "Thank you, Amelia." That evening, Amelia returned to her family's tiny farmhouse on the edge of town. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and the roof leaked whenever it rained. Her mother, Lydia, sat in a worn chair, thin and pale, with a quilt wrapped around her even in the heat. "Did you get the bread?" Lydia asked, her voice raspy. "Yes, Mama." Amelia unpacked the groceries and called her younger brother, Jamie, to wash up before supper. They ate quietly, as they often did. Lydia picked at her food, appetite weak. Jamie chattered about a bird he had seen near the creek. Amelia forced herself to smile, but her thoughts were heavy. Money was short. The doctor said Lydia needed proper medicine, but Amelia had no way of paying for it. She had been scrubbing floors for neighbors, taking sewing work when she could, and even considered leaving school to work full-time. After Jamie went to bed, Lydia reached for Amelia's hand. "You work too hard, sweetheart. I worry about you." Amelia squeezed her mother's frail fingers. "Don't. I'll figure something out." But as she lay awake that night, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, she wondered how much longer she could keep her promise. The next morning, Amelia's life took a turn she never expected. She had just finished sweeping the porch when a wagon rattled up the lane. A tall man in a neat vest jumped down, carrying himself with the air of someone important. He looked around, clearly uncomfortable with the poverty before him. "Miss Reed?" he asked. "Yes." Amelia wiped her hands on her skirt. He handed her a folded letter. "From Mr. Dawson. He requests your presence at Dawson Farm this afternoon." Her stomach tightened. Dawson Farm. Everyone in Oak Ridge knew it. The largest, wealthiest farm for miles around. Miles of golden wheat, barns full of cattle, and fields that seemed to stretch forever. Mr. Henry Dawson owned it all. He was said to be stern, proud, and never forgiving of those who crossed him. But Amelia also knew something else. Henry Dawson was the old man she had helped across the street. Amelia walked the dusty road that afternoon, nerves coiling tighter with each step. She had never been invited to Dawson Farm, let alone by the man himself. When the sprawling house came into view, with its white columns and manicured gardens, she felt completely out of place. A maid led her to a shaded porch where Henry Dawson sat in a rocking chair, cane leaning against the railing. "You came," he said simply. "Yes, sir," Amelia replied, trying to hide her unease. He gestured for her to sit. She perched on the edge of the chair opposite him, clutching her hands together. I wanted to thank you, Dawson said, studying her again with those sharp eyes. Not many would stop for an old man these days. It wasn't a trouble, Amelia said softly. His gaze lingered. Your father was Thomas Reed, wasn't he? Amelia's breath caught. Yes. You knew him. Dawson's face hardened, shadows crossing his features. We knew each other, all right. He didn't say more, and the silence stretched. Amelia shifted, feeling like she had stepped into something deeper than she understood. Finally, Dawson leaned forward. I'll be plain. You need work. I need someone with steady hands and an honest heart. Come work here at Dawson Farm. I'll see you're paid fairly. Amelia blinked, stunned. It sounded almost too good to be true. Yet his tone carried something weightier than simple kindness. She opened her mouth to accept, but Dawson raised a hand. There are conditions, he said, his voice firm. This farm runs on discipline. No excuses, no failures. If you take this chance, you must give it everything. And, he paused, his eyes narrowing. You must never mention your father's name again while you're here. The words struck her like a slap. Why? She whispered. That's not your concern, Dawson said sharply. Do you want the work or not? Amelia hesitated, torn. The thought of steady wages for her family pulled at her, but the strange hostility in his voice chilled her. Still, she thought of her mother's cough and her brother's thin frame. She swallowed hard. Yes, sir, I'll take it. Her first days at Dawson Farm were grueling. She was given work in the dairy barn, rising before dawn, hauling buckets, cleaning stalls until her back ached. The other workers watched her with suspicion, whispering that Dawson had never hired town girls before. One boy, Caleb, seemed particularly cold. Don't think you'll last, he muttered one evening as she scrubbed the troughs. Dawson chews people up and spits them out. Amelia ignored him, though doubt gnawed at her. But strangely, Dawson himself often lingered nearby, watching her with a look she couldn't place. Not cruel, not kind, something complicated, as if she reminded him of something he couldn't forget. One night, as she walked home, she overheard two workers talking in low voices near the barn. Reed girl, one said. If Dawson knew who her father really was. He knows, the other interrupted. That's the problem. But why bring her here? After all that happened. Amelia froze in the shadows, her heart hammering. What had her father done to earn Dawson's scorn? Why did Dawson, the richest man in town, look at her like she was both a burden and a key to something unsaid? She hurried home, shaken. That night, she held her brother close as he slept and stared into the dark, knowing she had stepped into a story much bigger than herself, one that could either save her family or tear apart everything she thought she knew. Amelia barely slept after overhearing the farmhands. The voices echoed in her head, words about her father that carried sharp edges and hidden wounds. She wanted to ask Dawson directly, but every time she imagined his piercing stare, she felt herself shrink back. Still, questions had a way of rising whether she wanted them or not. The next morning, Amelia returned to Dawson Farm, determined to keep her head down. She worked harder than usual, scrubbing the dairy barn until her hands turned raw, hoping sweat and silence might bury her unease. But by midday, Dawson himself appeared, leaning on his cane. You work like you're running from something, he said. Amelia froze. Just trying to do right, sir. Dawson studied her. Your father once said the same. Her heart stumbled. Then why? Why can't I speak of him here? Why do you look at me as if I remind you of something bitter? His expression hardened, and for a moment she thought he might dismiss her on the spot. Instead, he turned and motioned. Come. She followed him past the barns and fields until they reached a ridge overlooking acres of golden wheat. The land rolled in waves beneath the afternoon sun, beautiful and endless. Your father worked these fields once, Dawson said quietly. He was the finest hand I ever hired. Strong, loyal. I trusted him. Amelia's breath caught. Then what happened? Dawson's eyes narrowed. He betrayed me. The words struck her like a lash. That can't be true. He did, Dawson snapped. He knew I was bidding for this land I'd waited years to claim. Instead of standing with me, he struck a deal with my rival. Left me humiliated. The man nearly cost me everything. Amelia shook her head. Papa wasn't like that. He worked himself to the bone for us. He never spoke of you or any betrayal. Of course he didn't, Dawson muttered, his jaw tight. He died before he could. The silence that followed pressed heavy on Amelia's chest. Her father was gone, her mother too weak to shed light on the truth. She had no way of knowing who to believe. Finally, Dawson turned to her. You wanted answers. There they are. If you can't stomach working here, leave. But Amelia, though her heart trembled, lifted her chin. I'll stay. For my family. Something flickered in Dawson's eyes. Surprise, maybe even respect. Then stay, he said, before walking away. The days bled into weeks. Amelia worked hard, earning quiet nods from the farmhands who had once doubted her. Caleb, the boy who had mocked her, grudgingly began to help with the heavier tasks. You've got grit, he admitted one morning as they hauled hay. But whispers about her father lingered. She could feel them hanging in the air, like storm clouds that refused to break. One evening, as the workers gathered for supper in the big farmhouse kitchen, Amelia overheard Caleb again. He wasn't whispering this time. Funny, isn't it? He said to the others. The girl whose father betrayed Dawson now works under his roof. What's he planning, keeping her here? The room went quiet. All eyes shifted to Amelia. Her face burned, but she forced herself to stand tall. Whatever my father did, or didn't do, that's not me. I work for my family, not for Dawson's forgiveness. A murmur ran through the room. Then Dawson's voice cut in from the doorway. She's right. Everyone turned. Dawson stood there, cane tapping against the floor, eyes fixed on Amelia. The girl owes no debt for her father. Judge her by her own hands. The workers bowed their heads and returned to their meal. But Amelia caught the way Dawson's gaze lingered on her, troubled and searching, as if he wasn't so sure of his own words. Weeks later, a storm tore through Oak Ridge. Rain lashed against the fields, wind howled through the barns, and the river that bordered Dawson Farm swelled dangerously. Amelia was in the dairy barn when she heard shouts. The cattle are breaking loose. She ran into the downpour, skirts heavy with mud. A section of the fence had collapsed under the rushing water, and panicked cows were trying to push through. Farmhands struggled to hold them back, but the current was too strong. Without thinking, Amelia waded into the flood, grabbing ropes, shouting commands. Lightning cracked overhead. One wrong step and she could have been swept away, but she held fast, guiding the animals back until the others could secure the fence. When it was finally over, she stood drenched, shaking, but alive. Dawson was there, watching. Rain streamed down his weathered face, but his eyes shone with something softer than she had ever seen. You're your father's daughter, he said quietly. Brave as he was, Amelia met his gaze, trembling. Then why can't you forgive him? Or me? Dawson didn't answer right away. But later that night, when the storm had passed, he called her into his study. The room was lined with shelves of leather-bound books and maps of farmland. On the desk lay an old, yellowed letter. I found this years ago, Dawson said, pushing it toward her. I kept it because I couldn't face it. Maybe it's time. Amelia picked it up with shaking hands. It was her father's handwriting. Henry, if you're reading this, know I never meant to wrong you. I struck no deal against you. I was lied to, used as a pawn by men who wanted us divided. I tried to tell you, but you shut me out. If I die before you believe me, I pray you'll remember the years we worked side by side. I never stopped calling you a friend. Tears blurred the ink. Amelia looked up, heart breaking and mending all at once. Dawson sat back heavily in his chair, face pale. I never read it until now. Too blinded by pride. I thought your father betrayed me, but it was I who betrayed our friendship. Amelia's voice shook. All this time, you hated him for nothing. His hand trembled against his cane. And I punished you for it, though you never deserved it. For the first time, Henry Dawson, the richest man in town, looked small. From that night forward, things changed. Dawson softened, not into an easy man, but into one who carried guilt and tried to make amends. He raised Amelia's wages, gave her family enough to pay for her mother's medicine, and even sent Jamie to school with proper supplies. But more than that, he began to treat Amelia as more than a worker. He asked her opinions on the farm, listened when she spoke. Slowly, the farmhands followed his lead, no longer whispering about her father. Lydia's health improved with the medicine. Jamie thrived at school, chattering happily each evening. And Amelia, though still weary from long days, carried hope she hadn't felt in years. One golden afternoon, Dawson called Amelia to the ridge again. The wheat fields rippled under the sun, just as they had the day he first spoke of her father. "I'm an old man, Amelia," he said. "My blood kin are gone. This farm needs someone young, strong, and wise to guide it forward." She blinked. "Sir, I can't erase the past. But I can choose the future. And I choose you. This farm will be yours one day, if you want it." Amelia's breath caught mine. "But you're not just anything," Dawson interrupted, his voice firm. "You're Amelia Reed, the girl who helped an old man cross the street, not knowing who he was. The girl who stood in a flood when others faltered. The girl who proved her father's honor by her own courage." Tears welled in her eyes. She thought of her mother, her brother, her father's letter. She thought of the long road she had walked from hunger and struggle to this moment. "I'll care for it," she whispered. "I'll care for all of it, just as Papa would have." Dawson nodded, relief and pride etched in his lined face. "Then this land is in good hands." Years later, Oakridge would remember Amelia Reed not as the poor girl from the edge of town, but as the woman who inherited Dawson Farm and turned it into something greater. She opened its fields to neighbors in need, gave work to those without it, and never forgot the days when she herself had gone hungry. And when people asked how it all began, she would smile softly and say, "It started the day I helped a stranger cross the street."